Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTalks here, and I'm back to break down the second trailer that we got for Game of Thrones. Now I'm going to break it down based on location, and I'm going to take scenes from the last trailer that we got and combine them all together to really flesh out all of the scenes that we're going to be getting in the upcoming Game of Thrones season. But without further ado, let's get started. We get an even bigger look at the ship attack that takes place in episode 2 involving Euron Greyjoy, and he attacks Theon and Yara Greyjoy as well as Ellaria Sand and the Sand Snakes. And with this trailer, we see a lot more action scenes. And it's just showing that it's not a brushed off scene. We're getting a full-blown action sequence of a ship battle. We get our first shot of Euron Greyjoy actually attacking somebody. We see Yara Greyjoy for some reason jumping into the fight to make things very dramatic. But then we get a shot of Theon and he looks very upset, almost like he's watching his sister being taken away by his uncle. And we know that Theon escapes this conflict and he makes it back to Dragonstone, but we will see him later. But now I want to look at Winterfell, and in Winterfell we're going to get a lot of drama this season. Jon is going to leave to Dragonstone, and we're going to be left with Sansa, and the conflict that is brewing with Littlefinger. An interesting shot in the trailer that we get is Sansa actually walking away from the Weirwood Tree. The most interesting thing I want to point out is in the background you see Bran sitting in his wheelchair. And I gotta say, Sansa looks pretty panicked and pissed off. She looks very on edge. And I think it's because Bran just laid the smackdown of some vital information to Sansa that she didn't know before. First of all, it could be Jon's heritage, but I doubt it. I believe that Bran actually told Sansa about Littlefinger. Bran has access to history like no one else, and I believe that he told Sansa about Littlefinger betraying their father, Ned Stark, by turning the Gold Cloaks against him, as well as talking about having Jon Arryn killed, and telling her the small details of how Littlefinger pretty much started the war for the Five Kings. And he pitted the Starks against the Lannisters, and everything that Sansa loved that was taken away from her pretty much is indirectly caused by Littlefinger. So it would make sense for her to look a bit distraught. But moving on, we get a shot of Brienne and Pod, and they look happy back at Winterfell. And we know that Brienne has been training Pod to be a good fighter, and I think we're going to see more of that this season. But with these two characters, it's very interesting because I don't know what's going to happen to them. But whatever they do, it's going to be because Sansa ordered them to do it. But I'm guaranteeing that Pod and Brienne are a package deal. These characters are going to be together the whole season, and I don't see them separating. And then we get one more quick shot of Arya, and I believe that this is her approaching Winterfell, or her already arriving at Winterfell. We see her in warmer gear, but it's a shot of the sky, so it could be hiding the snow. But moving on to Bran Stark, we see him return to Castle Black with Meera Reed, and then we get to see him in his wheelchair, and it's a pretty sweet looking wheelchair. It looks better than Duran's for sure. And we see him sitting at the Weirwood, and we see a man standing there, and I am 100% convinced that this is Maester Walken. And I think what we're going to see is Maester Walken pretty much become Bran's right-hand man. So I think when we're going to see Maester Walken, it's pretty much going to be centered around Bran and his storyline of discovery. We also get a crazy shot of Bran warging into a crow. But it's not just one crow, it's a crow surrounded by a horde, or a group of crows, and they're flying over the Night King and his army. And I think this really means that Bran has truly taken the mantle of the Three-Eyed Raven. He now is the Raven. He has finally learned how to fly, even though I believe that has more significance in the story later to come. But he could potentially be spying on the Night King. And I think every crow that we've seen in this whole series is representative of Bran and his whole journey. When Sam killed a White Walker, he was being warned by crows, and then he was chased away by a horde. That was Bran signaling Sam to run, because Sam is so significant to the Long Night. And this also made me think of the huge action set piece coming later with Jon Snow. We see him go north of the wall with a team of men fighting off White Walkers and Whites. And it makes me think that Bran is going to have a huge role to Jon's survival. Even though Bran isn't north of the wall with his brother, he can bring his crows, he can be their eyes, he can warn them when danger is coming. And I think Bran is going to have a significant role in saving their asses north of the wall. But the most important thing that I think this presses on is the Night King and Bran's connection. We've seen it in Season 6 when Bran sneaks into the Weirwood Tree and the Night King ends up seeing him and marking him. But in this scene, the Night King looks right at the crow that seemingly Bran is warging into, and I think it furthers that connection between the two. The Night King was able to see Bran when he wasn't really there. He was only there in spirit, in the Weirwood. So I think we're going to see a lot of fighting between Bran and the Night King. From now until when the series ends, Bran and the Night King are going to be constantly at battle, but they're not going to be in physical fighting. It's going to be a mental game. And let's go to somewhere warmer, Dragonstone. We finally see Daenerys arrive on the shores of Dragonstone, and we see her tear down Stannis Baratheon's banners, really claiming that the castle is hers again. We see her check out the mapping table, and we see her walk the lands of Dragonstone. and we see her walking past tunnels and crypts that are buried beneath the castle structure. And I believe that we're going to see her enter these crypts. We also see Tyrion look pretty concerned, and I'm sure I would be too, because I believe in this scene he's actually looking at Drogon, who looks pretty fucking hungry. And I want to say that Tyrion isn't comfortable with Drogon because he only had a scene with Rhaegal and Viserion. And the tides were a bit different. The dragons were locked up and starving, and Tyrion was able to build their trust. But I don't think Tyrion's really had an interaction with the dragons since, because they terrify him, especially the alpha dragon Drogon. So it makes sense that Tyrion looks a little concerned because he looks like a little bite-sized cookie for Drogon. But I think we will see no harm will come to Tyrion, and he does have a good kingship with all the dragons. But on to more interesting news, we see Grey Worm and Missandei have sex or sexual relations. And I believe that this is in Dragonstone before Grey Worm goes off to war. And we're going to see him go to Casterly Rock and Highgarden. And after that, Jon is going to arrive in Dragonstone, probably in episode 3, with Davos and some Stark men. They're going to be preaching to Daenerys that the war isn't between her and Cersei, but her and the Long Night. We then see a man on the shores of Dragonstone, and I think this is probably Theon, after he realized his sister was stolen by his uncle, and that he has no penis. And then we see Daenerys looking across the sea, and then she ends up looking kind of at the camera like she's noticed somebody. And I guarantee it is this scene. Jon will end up approaching her, and they'll talk about stuff, and it'll be a nice scene between Jon and Daenerys. On the other side of the war, we see Euron Greyjoy arrive at King's Landing, kind of sailing into Blackwater Bay. And I'm pretty sure it's to give Yara Greyjoy, Ellaria, and Tyene Sand to Cersei, to whom he took from Theon, who has no penis. And in King's Landing, it looks very patrolled and controlled by the Gold Cloaks. We also see Cersei take a walk underground, and I believe this is where she could be torturing her new prisoners. And the background really interested me because it looks like dragon bones, and I find this fascinating because we see Arya hiding in big dragon bones in season 1, and I think Cersei is in the same place. But then we get one huge shot, and it's in King's Landing in the dragon pit, and this is going to be in the last episode of the season. And there's a big burly man wearing a kilt, and I'm convinced that this is the Hound. And what I like to point out is that just beside him is a crate, and the crate is open. It looks like it was holding something, possibly a white. And now it's open, so they've let it out. And now he's pulled out his sword, so it looks like the Hound is going to be attacking this white to prove that it can't be killed. And I also want to point out in this Dragon Pit sequence, we're going to be seeing pretty much every main character in all of Game of Thrones involved. From the north, south, east, and west. But that takes us to the war between the two sides, the Lannisters and Daenerys' army. And in this trailer, we see two major battles. The first battle is Highgarden, which I know takes place in episode 4. We see Jaime patrolling the castle that they took over. I don't know who the fuck that man is, but he doesn't even look like he's from this time period. But then there is war. We see the Tullys and the Lannister forces fight together, but little do they know they're fucked because the Dragon Lady is flying one that is the size of a 747. They also have a horde of savages that like to rape and pillage things coming right at them. So we see things get really bad and everything is burned to shit. So Jaime gets upset and he rides a horse with a stick. And then we see two people get totally burned alive, which really foreshadows the field of fire. We're going to be seeing Daenerys burn more than 100 men in this fight. And during this chaos, we're going to see Bronn save Jaime by grabbing him and throwing him into the water to avoid dragonfire. But then there's the other conflict, which I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be before or after Highgarden. It could even be at the same time. But we see the Unsullied using their knowledge. We know that Tyrion cleaned shit because he was in charge of plumbing at Casterly Rock. So it looks like they're using these tunnels and Tyrion's knowledge to get the upper hand. It looks like they sneak into the plumbing system through this little rock crevice here, work their way up, and let the other Unsullied through the front doors. And that ends up being very successful, and the Lannisters are in extremely rough shape. But the Lannisters are saved by the Dragon Pit meeting, which is when they capture a White to prove that the Long Night is a looming threat that everyone has to take care of. And that takes place in the north. And what we see from this trailer is a group of men arrive at Eastwatch by the Sea. We see Jon, Jorah, Gendry, and Davos, and multiple Stark men arrive. And we see another boat. And this boat actually belongs to the Hound, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, and Tormund. And I want to point out that this is the north because of the Black Sands. This is not Dragonstone. A lot of people are saying it's Dragonstone. It is Eastwatch by the Sea. But then everything ends up going wrong, and then they end up on the run. And they end up running to a big lake that happens to have a big rock platform in the middle. And the whole group circles up to defend themselves from the Whites coming at them. We also see them fighting White Walkers. I don't know how they're going to fit into this conflict, but it looks awesome. But then this is the most confusing shot. We see Jon attack someone, and he looks like a badass. It is an amazing shot, and I'm thoroughly impressed. But I don't understand what this means. Jon is looking at the platform that he was standing on with his group of men, defending themselves from whites. So this seems to be after the conflict because we see fire, which hints at Daenerys coming with the dragons and thinning out the whites. But then he's staring at a group of people on the left and the right, and that is more people than Jon came with. And why is he attacking just one person? So I don't understand what's happening, but this is the best explanation I have, is that the Night King is trying to recruit him somehow. Sure, Daenerys came in and burned everyone and rescued everyone out, and Jon has been left there alone. So the Night King is standing there sending an occasional white at Jon, kind of taunting him, knowing that Jon can't go anywhere. And he's kind of testing Jon to see what he's made out of. But I'm not sure, that's the best excuse I got, but this whole thing doesn't add up to me. But then we see a man riding away on a horse, and I'm convinced that this is Jon after the whole conflict has taken place. And he is riding on Benjen's horse. Benjen will come in, provide his horse, and sacrifice himself to save Jon. But I really like this trailer. I like the first one more, but the reason I appreciate this trailer so much is that it raised so many questions. I truly thought I knew Game of Thrones Season 7 backwards, but this trailer has laid down some shots that have made me realize that I don't know everything, and it's made me really excited. So if you want to bring up anything interesting that I didn't bring up, because I'd love to know stuff, please leave a comment down below. Also, please like this video and share this video like crazy. And I got a lot more videos coming out of the pipeline that you guys can watch and enjoy. But until then, I'll see you guys later.